Welcome back to another episode of the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Jones, the Bluff City Cowboy, coming to you live from Memphis, Tennessee. And we are continuing our training camp position breakdown as we talk about the Dallas Cowboys position groups. Tonight's show, we will continue to stay on the offensive side of the ball, and we will talk about the wide receiver position. So we got a lot of receivers. I kind of touched base on this last week. Got a lot of receivers, got a lot of position battles. Once you go past numbers 1 and 2, which are obviously Pickens and Lamb, and these guys got their work cut out for them. I know we got a lot of guys. I think we have 12 receivers on the team right now, so I know everybody isn't aware of all the receivers we have. So if you're not, this is a good way to kind of refresh your memory and catch up as we enter training camp. So when you start seeing those pet cats with a number you don't recognize, you can say, hey, I learned who that guy was from the Fifth Quarter Podcast. So thank you, everybody that's joining us. I see the views are starting to come in from the DC4L Facebook group. So thank you guys for joining us there. For those of you who are watching on DC4L Facebook group, make sure you hit that like button. So far, I see we have the views matching the likes. So thank you, everybody watching from DC4L group. For those of you who are watching from the Facebook group, we do have a YouTube channel. So if you get a chance, go over to YouTube, type in DC4L, hit that subscribe button, help the DC4L YouTube channel on their path to 1,000 subscribers. And also go find me on YouTube at Bluff City Cowboys. Hit that subscribe button as well. For those of you who are watching from X and from YouTube, we do have a Facebook group called DC4L. It's about 20,000 strong right now of diehard Cowboys fans. We have 20 admin who are consistently monitoring the group. So we don't allow any hate speech. We don't allow any name calling. We don't allow any fake news. So if you're looking to have some intellectual conversations with Cowboys fans, if you're looking to learn something new, if you're looking to keep track of all the news and notes that is Cowboys related, if you want to play fantasy football, we have about 15 fantasy football leagues going. If you want to have a chance to win prizes, we have giveaways, and we have contests throughout the season. And of course, we have the Fifth Quarter Podcast sponsored by DC4L. So we have a lot of different avenues to keep you guys engaged. So if you're watching from X and you're watching from YouTube, go over to Facebook and type in DC4L, hit that like button, join the group. You'll be glad that you did. All right, so for those of you joining for the first time, I'm Marcus Jones, the host. I don't try to hold you more than an hour. So I have my content, I have my topic. I'm going to go in and out. But this show is fueled by Fifth Quarter Nation. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, feel free to put them in the chat. I don't charge you stars. I don't have a super chat. All you got to do is just type your comments. I try my best to put them all on the screen. And if you have a question, I try my best to answer it. Some nights it can get kind of overwhelming, so I may miss some people. But for the most part, if you get in the comments, you're going to see your question or your comment put on the screen. So first up, we got my guy, Jeffrey Dunnigan. Literally just got off the phone with him. So thank you for logging in and joining us tonight, Jeff. Longtime friend, longtime Cowboys fan. You guys will probably see him on the show with me at some point over the next couple of weeks. So if you want to join in on the show, follow Jeff's lead. You can put how long you've been a Cowboys fan, your favorite player, where you're from, any questions, any comments Cowboys related. I'm here for it. So like I said, tonight's topic is the wide receiver position. So basically, I'm going to go through all the wide receivers, kind of give you the pecking order. And then at the end, I'll kind of give you my thoughts on who I think makes the team, who are the starters, and why. We got a lot of guys that we're going to talk about tonight. This is probably going to be a fairly short show unless you guys get active in the comments, because there's really not much to say about them. It's a lot of them, but it's really not a lot to say. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, and let's get started at the top. Of course, you guys know the two straws that stir the drink for the wide receiver group, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are arguably the best wide receiver tandem in the league. Um, if you watch this show, I've been telling you guys all off season, there's no worries about George Pickens. He was going to sign his franchise tag. He's going to be in OTAs. He's going to be at training camp, and he's going to be here, and he's going to be playing his best this season to try to earn that big contract. So we're going to probably see the best version of George Pickens that any team will ever see, because he's literally trying to get paid. He's only 24 years old, so this is his prime year. This is his contract year. Even if he's not here next year, whatever version of George Pickens we get is going to be the absolute optimum version. And then on top of that, you got CeeDee Lamb in the slot, perennial All-Pro, arguably top 5 receiver. So we could potentially have 2 top 5 receivers on this team this year. I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination that we have 2 guys with 150 targets, 1,100 yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns. These guys are really going to carry this offense this year. And we have a tough schedule, so we're definitely going to need them. Jeff said, don't know why my gut wants me to bring in one more wide receiver. Well, let's talk through the wide receivers, Jeff, and then tell me if you still feel that way after we have this conversation. Because to be honest, I still feel that way too. And I'll tell you why as we go into the show. So talking about these guys, both of them will probably be all pros this year. Arguably the best tandem is kind of a pick your poison situation. If you got George Pickens lined up at the X, if you don't roll that safety over top, you're going to get killed. If you do roll that safety over the top, you're probably still going to get beat, but you have a chance. But if you roll that safety over the top, now you have CeeDee Lamb in the slot who's going one-on-one against a 5'10" nickel corner with basically an open field. And the only help that slot would have, if there's no safety, the only help he'll have is a linebacker. So are you going to double Lamb? Are you going to double Pickens? If you run a zone, Lamb is going to destroy you in the slot. If you go any kind of press or any kind of shell coverage, Pickens is going to kill you on the edge. So it's really going to be a pick your poison situation. And both of these guys have big playability, and they're a tough cover individually. Put them together, and you got an elite package. So really, regardless of what I say about the rest of these guys, these 2 guys on the screen are probably going to be about 60% of your passing offense. So you're really only getting maybe 15% of your passing production from the other receivers. So really, you don't need a lot from those other receivers, but you want to have guys who can maximize the opportunities that they get to the best of their abilities. And that takes us to the next group of receivers, and that is the returning contributors. So we've got 2 explosive young receivers here. First of all, we'll talk about Kevontae Turpin. Been here a couple of years, elite speed, super explosive guy. Has kind of been a return specialist since he's been here. Thought he would get an opportunity to kind of spread his wings in the offense last year, but those opportunities really didn't materialize. Unfortunately for him, he's a pure slot guy. You can't really put him at the X or the Z. So as long as CeeDee Lamb is in the slot, it's really tough to get Turpin on the field consistently. And just looking at Turpin's stats, he only had 26 catches, 390 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. That's an average of a catch and a half a game and 20 yards. Honestly, I think that's pretty much what he's going to be. I think his his contributions on this team have to come from special teams because I just don't see him being an offensive producer. Once again, we're at 11 minutes. The views are still going up, so thank you guys for joining. Remember, if you'd like to be involved in the conversation, feel free to get in the chat. I don't charge you any stars. I don't charge you any super chats. All you gotta do is put your comment in the screen, and I'll put it up. So next, we'll talk about Ryan Flanoy, the guy who kind of stepped on the scene last year, was kind of an unknown guy on the team. His rookie year, he was just a guy. Saw a lot of potential coming out of college, and we were hoping that he could kind of put it together. And then last year, he was given a couple opportunities when CeeDee Lamb went out, and he took full advantage of them. He only had, let's see, he only had 475 yards last year, but about 230 of those yards came in two big games. So he has the potential to be a game changer if needed. So I'm looking forward to seeing if he can possibly take that third year leap and show more flashes and kind of be a front runner for that wide receiver 3 position. Because in my opinion, that wide receiver 3 position is still wide open. I don't think he has it solidified despite those 2 good games he had last year. But as of right now, I think he's kind of the front runner. Just got to hope he can build on last year's success. I talked about earlier in the show. I think Pickens will be at training camp. He definitely will be there. Lamb will be there also. I don't think you're going to see much of those guys in practice. You definitely won't see them in preseason games. So, you guys are Cowboys fans. You know, Dak doesn't normally play preseason. The starting wide receivers don't normally play preseason. So, we're going to see a lot of those second unit guys kind of being our go-tos, even in the games where it's supposed to be kind of a dress rehearsal. So Ryan Flanoy is probably going to kind of be your number one starting off in the preseason games. Let's see if he can build on last year and solidify himself as a starter. Jeff says if Flanoy stays healthy and makes the most of his opportunities, I'll be good. Again, I'm right there with you, but I'm sure you have some hesitation because, again, he's a third-year guy. He had 2 monster games, but outside of that, I'm just going through his stats right now. 21 yards, 14 yards, 0 yards, 7 yards, 12 yards, 2 yards. That's the rest of his season. And then you got 115 and 114. So he had 2 great games, and outside of that, he was pretty much an afterthought. So can he be a guy? We don't even need a lot. If he can be a guy who can consistently give us 30 to 40 receiving yards a game, that's more than enough based off of what we have with Pickens and Lamb. So the question is, can he take that step and be more of a consistent player? We shouldn't have a guy who's our number 3 receiver that does not have at least 20 yards because the entire game you're getting single coverage. If you only get 3 targets, 4 targets, if you're a wide receiver going against the other team's number 3, number 4, number 5 corner, and there's no safety over top, you should at least make 2 catches for 20 yards. That's the minimum. So I'm expecting to see him with a little bit more consistency, hoping he can build on that and kind of stamp himself as the next guy to step up. So those guys are the ones that I'm expecting to be the contributors from last year. Now we'll talk about the guys who are returning, but they're just kind of afterthoughts in the background. The first guy, Jonathan Mingo, a name that Cowboys fans pretty much have hated to hear the past 3 years. Ever since Jerry hyped it up, we're bringing in a former high draft pick when we were kind of down, and then this was the the product. He can't play the slot. He can't play the X. He doesn't play special teams. And last year, he was probably a healthy scratch for half the season. And then the games that he did play, he had one catch for 25 yards on the entire season. And this is a guy who was a former second-round pick. That's not good. So he provides us no production. The traits are still there. He's only 23 years old. He was a legit 4.4 guy, physical specimen, 220. He was good in the yak coming out of Ole Miss, but comes to Dallas and provides nothing. Now, 2 years ago when he first came, that was kind of a lame duck season. So you kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. But then last year, new system, wide receiver 3 spots wide open because Tolbert doesn't take advantage of it. Lamb misses 6 games. Mingo doesn't grab the bull by the horns and take advantage of it. The big question with him is, can he tap into what got him drafted? This is his last shot. He's probably out of the league if he doesn't produce something this year. Oh, he's worse than Schoonmaker. I saw Schoonmaker give some flashes. I've seen nothing from Mingo. Absolutely nothing. So that takes us to Mingo, the guy with all the potential who showed us nothing. And then we go to the opposite side of the spectrum, and we got Trayshawn Holden, the guy who was an undrafted receiver last year. He was everybody's pet cat. Big kid, came from Alabama, went to Oregon. Big talker, said he's coming for heads, showed us some flashes in preseason, ended up spending the season on the practice squad, and now he returns with a bigger chip on his shoulder and a wide open spot for wide receiver 3 and 4. So now the question with him is, can he make that second year leap like Flournoy made, make enough plays to get himself on the field? And Jeff, this goes back to your comment earlier about wanting to bring in one more guy. The reason I think Holden has a good chance of making a team, I talked about this on a show about a month ago when I did my 5 positions of need. My number 2 position of need was slot receiver. The team currently does not have what I would consider a slot receiver on the team outside of CeeDee Lamb. I like Turpin. I think Turpin can only play the slot position, but I don't think he's a good slot because he's not a good route runner. He's more of a small Z. If you just need a guy to run a 9 route and clear out something for the tight end, I think that's what Turpin can do. Or you need a guy on an end around or a trick play. That's Turpin's specialty. I don't think he can give you anything as a pure slot receiver. I think Holden has something. Holden has a lot of CeeDee Lamb in him. He's not CeeDee Lamb's level, so I don't want to put that out there. But the same height, weight, speed, and traits that CeeDee Lamb has, Holden has a lot of those. And he also kind of plays with that dog mentality. So if he can step in and solidify himself as a legitimate big slot receiver, I think he has a really good chance of making his team. I don't think he's a Z. I think he's a big slot. So I think that's going to cause him some problems. That's going to give Flournoy less competition on the outside. But that backup slot receiver is wide open for anybody who wants to take it. And for me, I think Holden is kind of leading the pack on possibly being the next guy up if he could take that next step. There's a big opportunity waiting for him. Okay, so we talked about all the guys who were on the team last year. Now let's talk about some of the new guys. And we will start off with the free agents. Now, this is a very interesting free agent group. Um, all three of these guys were pet cats for me coming out of college, so I know a ton about them. To be honest, all three of these guys were guys that I wish that we drafted, and when they first became free agents, I wish we picked them up. So you most fans haven't heard much about these guys, but I'm excited to see them on the team. We'll start off from left to right. First off, we got Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Now, this is a guy who coming out of college was getting Megatron comparisons. Big kid out of USF, 6'4", 6'7" wingspan, 9-inch hands, ran a legitimate 4.3, had a 39-inch vertical. So everything you want from a receiver in terms of a specimen, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was that coming out of college. Wasn't very productive coming out of college, so he was really a traits guy. So I would have really loved to see him at the bottom of the roster and build his way up. He's kind of carved a path out for himself as just a smart veteran who can stretch the field. I mean, if you throw him at the Z, and like I talked about before with Flanoy, whoever's playing the Z out wide opposite George Pickens, you're getting the team's third or fourth best cornerback. And that cornerback has no help over top because all coverage is rolled to Lamb and Pickens. So if you have a guy who is 6'4", long arms, 4.4 speed, and he's opposite a cornerback who's probably a borderline bench guy, I like my chances with Valdez-Scantling. Now, again, he's not going to set the world on fire. His hands aren't the most consistent. But with that height and that speed, like I said about Flanoy, all I need is a receiver to give me 20 to 30 yards a game consistently. If I got a guy like Scantling out there, if I throw him 3 targets, they're all going to be deep targets. He should catch 2 of them to just get me those yards early to make a big splash play. So I like him because he's a vertical threat. He's the only other receiver who can play the X position, which would be George Pickens' position. So if heaven forbid something happened to George Pickens, you have a guy that you can at least put out there that can create some separation and get down the field to pull that safety. Or if you decide to really do a mismatch and you want to put George Pickens at the Z, so he's off the line of scrimmage, now you got pick your poison. Because do you send your best corner on George Pickens off the line with a free release? Or do you keep him at the X spot where Valdez-Scantling is 6'4", 4.4 speed is going to take him vertical? So now that opens up a lot more for the offense. So I like him as my front runner for the wide receiver 3 position just because he's a veteran. He knows how to play the game. He's a vertical threat, and he can play the X or the Z. Now, the hands are inconsistent. There's no question about that. But the traits are there, and really all we need are traits. Traits and consistency. So if he can just give the threat of getting open, that gives us so much more for this offense. I don't think Flournoy gives that threat yet until he earns it. I think Valdez-Scantling just being the guy, first guy out the bus type guy, because he looks like a freak of nature, he gives you that. So I think I have Valdez-Scantling as my front runner for wide receiver 3. All right, so then we go to the next guy. We got Tyler Johnson, former Tampa Bay Buck, former LA Ram, a true slot receiver, super smart, super tough. He's been around the league for a while. Hasn't been really productive, but he's another one of those guys like Valdez Scantling where he's the type of guy, if you bring him in the locker room, he's going to be a professional. He knows his assignments. He's going to do his assignments. If you just need a guy who knows how to get to his spot, this is the type of guy you want on your team. Because again, 60% of our passing game is going to Lamb and Pickens. Another 25% of our passing game, 20%, is going to Ferguson, Brevin Spanford, and Schoonmaker. Then you got about 5% going to the running backs. So that really only leaves about 15% of the passing game to these receivers. So you don't need a guy who can be a third all-pro. You just need a guy who knows how to get to the spot he needs to get in so that the other two guys can take advantage of their opportunities. And I think Tyler Johnson is a guy who can do that. Again, I talked about this a few minutes ago with Jeff's question. We don't have any what I would consider pure slot guys. And when I say a slot guy, I mean a guy who knows how to run the dig route, who knows how to read the nickel corner. So if the nickel corner is playing press, he knows to kind of press that corner and then hit the out route or hit the comeback route. If that nickel's playing outside, he knows to kind of ride them and take them in the post or run that in route or run a curl. Those are nuances that most receivers don't have. So you need a guy who can do that to keep that nickel corner honest if you decide to put CeeDee Lamb at the Z and you want to let Pickens kind of have a free reign out on the edge by himself. So you need a guy who can legitimately know what he's doing. So having a guy who's a professional on this team is just as important as having a guy who can produce. That's just my opinion. Jeff says Trigg taking Schoonmaker spot. We had that conversation a couple of weeks ago. You're right. That's just going to open up things for him as well. Tyler Johnson is a guy who hasn't put up a lot of stats. But like I said, he's been around the league for a while. He's a professional. He came in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady really trusted him as a safety valve. Then he went to the Rams with Matthew Stafford, built a lot of trust there. And now he comes to Dallas with another top-tier quarterback. I see we got Lee Harrison joining us. Lee Harrison, thank you for tuning in. We're about probably 75% through with the show, but definitely chime in the conversation. Conversation right now is the wide receiver position. So far, I've talked about the guys who are returning from last year, and then I'm almost finished talking about the guys who we just brought in, and we're starting first with the free agents. So we just talked about Valdez Scantling. I just talked about Tyler Johnson. Now we'll go to the last guy, and this is Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims is another guy kind of like Mingo. Every trait you want in a wide receiver, Mims has it. Coming out of college, out of Baylor, former second-round pick, should have been a first to be honest, but 6'3", 210, legit 4.3 speed, 40 plus inch vertical, solid hands. For some reason, it just didn't work out with the Jets. The Jets are the Jets. They destroy careers. So I give him a little bit of grace because of that, because it's very rare that you see a guy perform with the Jets and then they go somewhere else and they become amazing. Look at Sam Darnold. So he hasn't put it together, but I give a little bit of that to that Jets curse. Yeah, he's my wild card also, Jeff. He's a good enough route runner. He's kind of like Valdez Scantling. He can play the X. He can play the Z. He can give you a little bit of slot, but it's not going to be slot as in running routes crisp. It's if you just need a guy to kind of split those safeties and run that skinny post or a nice crossing route to open up something for somebody else. He can give you that, but that's about it. But if you need a guy who, like Valdez-Scantling, you want to put pressure on the X, or you've got him at the Z going against the other team's cornerback 4, and he needs to beat one-on-one coverage and get downfield, he can do it. And I think he has enough freak athlete in him to make some plays if given that opportunity. When he went to the Jets, he was playing with a bad quarterback and a bad system and he was treated like the number 1 receiver. And he's not a number 1. He's never been a number 1, even coming out of college. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in training camp. Just like Jeff said, he's definitely my wild card. Some guys take a couple of years to kind of turn things around and flip their switch. I'm going to take you guys back a few decades with this name. I'm probably going to mispronounce it. Was it Laurent Robinson? I don't know if you guys remember that name from years back. He was a wide receiver who he played with the Rams back when the Rams were a terrible team, those Jeff Fisher years. And he played with the Falcons when the Falcons were a terrible team. Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce his first name. I think it's Laurent, but it's spelled Laurent. But yeah, he was drafted in the 3rd round. Another one of those freak athlete type guys, 6'2", 210, 4.3 speed, 39-inch vertical. Played for the Falcons on a bad Falcons team, didn't do much. Then ended up getting traded to the Rams. Went to the Rams. Jeff Fisher years, didn't do much. No, he didn't play with the Seahawks, Jeff. After he left Dallas, he got that big contract with the Jaguars, and then he just fell victim to the injury bug. And he just kept getting hurt every year. I think he had a bunch of concussions. I think he had like 4 concussions in a year or something crazy like that, and then he had to retire. But I'm almost certain he didn't play for the Rams. I remember it was the Cowboys. It was the Falcons, the Rams, Cowboys, Jags. But yeah, going back to my story. Freak athlete guy comes to Dallas. Nobody knew who he was, basically. And then he just explodes for 2 years. And he was essentially our number 2 receiver for those years. And then he turns that into a big contract with the Jaguars. So I can see Denzel Mims being a guy like that, where if given opportunity, he can be a 5, 6, 700-yard guy just off of big plays alone and be kind of a security valve for the quarterback. If something happens and they have Lamb and Pickens covered, you just throw it up and let Mims go get it and make a big play. So I'm excited about Mims. I hope we have the quarterback play in the preseason to let him show what he can do. That's my only concern about him and his chances of making the team. Valdez-Scantling is a pro. He knows how to play the game. Bad quarterback play won't affect what he does. Tyler Johnson is a pro. He knows how to play the game. Bad quarterback play won't affect how he produces. Denzel Mims is another story. We saw it with the Jets. I like our backup quarterback. Well, the guy that I think is going to end up winning the job as our backup quarterback. I think Sam Howell's going to end up winning that spot. So if Mims get to play with a guy like Howell, I think it'll be a really good opportunity for him with that second unit. Unfortunately, with all these receivers, they have to rely on Joe Milton to be a productive quarterback. And I think this is going to hurt a lot of their chances, especially for the young guys who aren't used to being professionals. And we have a lot of them. So that messed up Holden a lot last year because he did not look good when Milton was on the field. Jalen Marino Cropper didn't look good when Holden was when Milton was on the field. So I think Milton's going to hold back a lot of these guys, but they got to fight through it because that number 3 spot to me is wide open. Right now, I'm putting Valdez-Scantling at the top of the list. I think Flanoy is right there under him. And I think if Mims can show enough, he can end up being our wide receiver 5 or 6 if we keep 6. All right, so we just talked about the free agents that we brought in. Now let's go to our last group, and that is the rookies. I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but we signed 3 rookie wide receivers in undrafted free agency. They all have very similar backgrounds and similar traits. I don't know what the team did to differentiate on why they picked these guys up, to be honest. Once again, we'll go from left to right. Let's see. Kurt Whitmer, thank you for joining us tonight. Joe Milton would be good if he put a little touch of air on the ball instead of bullets. That's easier said than done, Kurt Whitmer. He only knows how to throw the ball one way, and that's his biggest problem. We got Ice Cold Cowboy joining us. Said, I cook barbecue, so I'll be listening. Appreciate you tuning in, Ice Cold Cowboy, as always. I like Flanoy as well. I think his spot is solidified. Jeff says we definitely keeping 5. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. I'm right there with you. But if they do keep 6, they have to make some tough decisions. You said 2 cuts and a practice squad candidate. That's a pretty good summary, Jeff. I can't disagree with you. But I got to talk about him anyway. Anthony Smith, undrafted player out of, I believe, TCU. Let's see, I have a screen for every guy. So Anthony Smith out of Eastern Carolina. My fault. I think about those colors. Anthony Smith has some explosiveness. Probably the best route runner out of this group. Really good with yak yards. Has some special teams value. So if something happens with Turpin, he's the only return guy we have in our wide receiver group. None of our other guys are return guys. So if they value another return guy and they don't see a guy at the running back position like in Blue or Davis, that's going to give Anthony Smith a leg up with these other wide receivers in possibly keeping 6 guys. Some of his weaknesses. He's kind of a slim guy, lean frame, so he needs to add some strength. He struggled against press coverage. He can play some slot, so again, that's another check box for him. So he can give you some return game, and he can play some slot. Those are 2 things we don't have in abundance. So if he can carve out a niche there and possibly get that wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 spot. Eastern Carolina played one of those typical 4 or 5 wide scrambling quarterback offenses. So he does not have a lot of pro style offensive scheme experience. It was pretty much just everybody spread out wide, and I'm going to find an open guy, similar to what you saw with Ohio State. So he's going to need to get some experience in a structured offense, especially if they decide to put him in the slot. He's a solid route runner, but he wins more off of his explosiveness than the actual routes. So he's the type of guy who can cut on a dime and change directions really good. And in college, that makes it look like he's a good route runner. But in the NFL, he needs to show a little bit more. But of all the undrafted guys, this is the guy that I like the most. just because of his explosiveness and his ability to play the slot. Lee Harrison asked about Caleb Downs. We talked about safeties about 3 weeks ago, Lee Harrison. You missed out on that conversation. Tonight's conversation is only about wide receivers. If you want to go catch up on that conversation, you can go to the YouTube page and you can find the show we broke down cornerbacks and safeties, and you can hear my thoughts on Caleb Downs. All right, let's see. So next up, we will talk about Camden Brown. Since we bring up Caleb Downs, we go to Camden Brown. Camden Brown is a wide receiver from Georgia Southern. He played 3 years at Auburn, so he does have SEC experience. He did nothing at Auburn. He's the type of guy, he was a big fish in a small pond type situation. He's 6'4", not very fast, but he has really good hands, and he's a smooth runner. So he just went down to the SWAC level and just dominated. I mean, he was bigger and faster than every cornerback that he saw. He was the first receiver in Georgia Southern history to have 1,000 yards. And he had 14 touchdowns last year, not for his career, for one season. 14 touchdowns. He took advantage of his 6'4" frame. Again, very physical, attacking the ball, very physical after the catch, has really good body control. But again, I'm concerned because he was at Auburn and did nothing. He goes to Georgia Southern and he becomes all world. What does that mean at the NFL level? The learning curve will probably be too steep for him. Like Jeff said, this is probably one of those guys where you may keep him on the practice squad, because when you're in practice, you need a guy who can simulate some of these big receivers that we're going to be facing. So in practice, he can give you that, but that's about it. Rob Wallace 7501 asked a good question. I'm confused on this on receivers. Easiest breakdown ever. Beyond top three might be interesting, but who cares? Well, Rob, you need to know who's on your team, because you never know who can step up. And if you're a Cowboys fan, I don't know if you are, but one thing I notice about Cowboys fans are they all kind of have that same mentality as you of, if a guy's not a Pro Bowler, then I don't care to know who he is. And then when he gets on the field and succeeds, fans are like, well, who is this guy? I've never heard of him. What is he doing out there? That's why a show like this one exists, so that when you see a guy that you've never heard of, you can at least kind of draw back to this show and say, hey, I've heard of Camden Brown before, the guy that made the big one-handed catch in training camp. He's not just some random guy who I've never heard of. If give you another example. Let's go back to last year, since we're there, Rob. Last year, Ryan Flanoy was where Camden Brown was. He was just a guy. Nobody knew who he was. He was a late round draft pick the year before. I don't think he played one game in 2024. 2025, he's in training camp. Everybody falls in love with Trayshawn Holden. Lo and behold, Trayshawn Holden gets cut on the practice squad. Ryan Flanoy is our fourth receiver. The fan base says, well, who is Ryan Flanoy? That's why we have this show. We could be talking about the next Ryan Flanoy, and now instead of saying, I've never heard of this guy, because I'm giving this breakdown, you have an idea of what could be in the pipeline a year or two from now, or what could break out in this training camp. People didn't know who Miles Austin was either. It just happens like that sometimes. So this show is really we know the top guys are the top guys. I know you probably joined the show late, but like I said earlier in the show, 60% of our passing game is going to come from Lamb and Pickens. So these guys, like you said, it might be a who cares situation, but you need to know who's kind of coming up and where the competition is going to lie. But I'm right there with Jeff. What Jeff's comment was before. This is probably going to be 2 cuts in a practice squad candidate, but they're on the team right now. We're going to talk about them. But if I had to go back to one of these guys and say who I think has the best chance of being a guy who can take a spot, it's Anthony Smith. He can play some slot. He can play some special teams. So we'll just have to see how it works out. And then we'll go to the last guy. And this is Jordan Hudson, wide receiver from SMU. Another one of those guys who comes from one of those wide open offenses. Really good route runner. Has a lot of explosiveness after the catch. He plays with a lot of competitiveness. So he's the type of receiver, he's going to attack the ball. He's about 6 foot, 195, 200 pounds. Kind of made in that Randall Cobb body type. Plays the same way. Strong hands, reliable target. Not the fastest guy, but when the ball's in the air, he's going to make a play on it. Personally, I don't think he has a shot at making the team, but you never know what can happen when you see a guy in training camp. Because I can go back to the conversation I had last year, and I know Jeff brings this up a lot. This time last year when I was doing my breakdown of linebackers, I said that Shamar James was going to have an uphill battle to make this roster. 5th round pick, kind of undersized, had a lot of vets in front of him. I'm sure some of you guys who've watched the show for a while remember that conversation well. And a lot of fans didn't know who Shamar James was. A lot of people are gonna try to use hindsight and say, well, I've always known who Shamar James was. I can promise you, this time last year, there were people on this show who were saying, I didn't know who Shamar James was. And he steps up as a rookie and has 100 tackles, and now he's going to pretty much be our first guy off the bench. So you just never know what can happen at certain positions with certain players. Yeah, I like Shamar James. That's the crazy thing. I liked him coming out of college. I just didn't think his traits would translate to the NFL that quick. I thought he would be one of those guys who need a year or 2 or 3 to kind of build his body up and catch up with the speed of the game. But he shocked me and had a really good season. So that's pretty much all I have at the wide receiver position. I've pretty much covered all 12 wide receivers. So if I were to go through the list, I think we're keeping 5. Because when I do my position breakdown, most teams on their 53-man roster, they normally keep 27 defensive guys. Then they normally keep about 24 offensive guys. And then you got your kicker, punter, holder. That makes up your 53. So it's more like 27, 23, or 26, 24. Let's assume it's 24 offensive guys. So off top, you got 10 offensive linemen. So that's damn near half of your offensive personnel. You got 3 quarterbacks. That's a given. That's 13. Then you've got 3 to 4 running backs. That's 17. Then you've got 3 to 4 tight ends. So that's 20. So plus or minus 5 receivers. So the question is, if you want to keep a 6th receiver, do you go with 8 offensive linemen instead of 9, which would mean you will be cutting 5. Drew Shelton's a lock. TJ Bass is a lock. Nate Thomas is a lock. So you be cutting a Johnny Cornelius or DJ Wingfield, which I think both of those guys make the roster, by the way. We'll talk about that next week. We talk offensive line. So do you cut one of those guys to keep a 6th receiver? If you go to the tight end position, are you cutting Brevin Spann-Ford or everybody's fan favorite to keep a 6th receiver? Go to the running back position. Are you cutting Malik Davis to keep a 6th receiver? That's the decision the team has to make. I just can't see from a numbers perspective how we can keep 6. The only way I can see us keeping 6 receivers is if they cut a guy like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's a veteran on a minimum contract. They cut him. They say, look, we're going to cut you. Go home for 24 hours. Don't answer the phone. Once we get the wide receiver and the offensive positions figured out, you're going to be our first phone call. If they do that, I think they can find a way to keep 6. Because at that point, you're going to be able to put, who am I missing? You're going to be able to put Charles Snowden on the suspension list. You'll probably have a guy or two that's going to start off on the PUP list. Injuries are part of the game. There's going to be at least one guy who gets hurt in training camp and has to start the season off on the PUP list. So if that happens, you're going to have a chance to get a 6th receiver. But if not, I think they'll keep 5, and they may ask Valdez-Scantling to play on the practice squad for 3 weeks. I can see that happening as well. So he wouldn't technically be on the roster, but he would be a guy that would be on the practice squad, but you would call him up from the practice squad the first 3 weeks. And then that gives you, instead of 24 hours, that'll give you a month to figure out the wide receiver position. So I'm assuming that's what happens. So then you got 5 receivers on the roster plus Valdez-Scantling, who's kind of there but not there. So we know Pickens and Lamb are a lock. I think Turpin is a lock. I think Flanoy is a lock. So that's 4. And if Valdez-Scantling is my veteran who's kind of at home, kind of on the practice squad, but still on the team, that gives me 1 spot left between Mingo, Holden, the 3 rookies, Denzel Mims, and Tyler Johnson. So I'm just curious, who do you guys think are the 5 receivers? I see Jeff put his in the comments already. So Jeff has Lamb, Pickens, Flanoy, Holden, Turpin. If it's 6, it's Mims, MVS. I'm right there with you. Like, again, I think MVS is going to be on the team, but not really on the team for the first week to 3 weeks. His contract is only 1 year, $1 million. So that contract tells me nobody was checking for him in the offseason. So it's not like he's going to be a highly sought after person if he gets cut. And the good thing about him, he's a veteran. So if he gets cut, he doesn't go through waivers. He's just immediately a free agent. So all you got to do is tell him, don't answer the phone. If you don't answer the phone in 24 hours, you're going to see that Dallas area code come up. You answer it, and you're either going to be back on the roster or you're going to be on the practice squad. So I think that's going to be what happens with him. We're definitely keeping Brevin Spann-Ford. I was just giving that Kurt Whitmer as an example. If you want to keep 6 receivers, those are the type of guys you would have to give up to keep one, which lets you know we're probably not keeping 6. Let Davis go and use Blue and Maffa. Unfortunately, and we'll probably talk about running backs in a week or maybe 2 weeks, but just early thoughts on that. We don't have a lot of experience at the running back position. So We don't know what Jaden Blue is. Fans want to assume they know what Phil Mafia is, but they don't, because he didn't play more than a game and a half of real competitive football. When we get in training camp, Malik Davis may be the only adult in the room. And just like I talked about earlier in the show, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Tyler Johnson, sometimes you don't need the most productive guy. You just need the guy who's the most professional to make sure things can continue to go as they should. And I think Malik Davis has pretty much shown that's why he keeps getting brought back, and that's why he's going to have a good chance to make the roster this year. So we'll see about that. I think Mingo is definitely gone. I don't know who he has as a sponsor in the front office or in the scouting department or on the coaching staff, but he keeps getting shots to come back. I would be shocked if he makes the team, but he keeps getting brought back. I don't know why, but I think he's gone too, Jeff. I 100% agree with you. But I talked about who I think makes the team, and I'm right there with you, Jeff. What's gonna be the monkey wrench that gets thrown into this that gives somebody else another opportunity is, number one, I just talked about this. I've talked about this for 2 months. We don't have a backup slot receiver. If something happens to CeeDee Lamb like it did last year, we're going to lose a lot at that slot position. Last year we had Tolbert, and we were able to throw Flanoy in there, and he was able to give us a little bit of something. I don't think we're going to have that this year, because I don't think Flanoy was a good slot. I just think he took advantage of a couple of big plays when they came his direction. I don't think his big plays came at the slot position. I just think he played the slot receiver for us. And then when he went to the Z, he made plays. But we don't have a slot on this team. And the fact that we don't have a slot is going to give a guy like a Trayshawn Holden, a Tyler Johnson, or the rookie Anthony Smith an opportunity to solidify a spot. Because if Lamb's not playing in the training camp, somebody's going to be getting a lot of slot reps at that number 2 group. And whoever can show that they can consistently be the backup slot is probably going to have a lock on their position, because you got to have a backup slot. You can't throw Pickens at the slot. You can't throw Valdez-Scantling at the slot. They tried Flanoy at the slot, but he didn't make plays there. None of these other guys can play slot. So if a guy like a Anthony Smith steps in and really shows something as a slot receiver, he has a shot of making this team over Holden. Another thing, we're paying Turpin $5 million to be a kick returner and a punt returner in a league that basically has taken away the value of kick return. It's a conversation fans don't like to have, because we all have our pet cats and we love Turpin, and we all think about that preseason game 3 years ago. We had 2 returns for a touchdown. He hasn't done much since then. Let's be honest. Do you want to pay $5 million for a guy to be a punt returner? Because they're not kicking him the ball on kick return, and they don't have to kick it to him on punt return. Sometimes if they're pinned back, they're forced to, but that's not often. So do you want to pay $5 million to a kick returner and a punt returner that gives you nothing on offense? Again, Anthony Smith, I'm saying the name again. I'm not saying he's going to make the team. I'm just putting it out there. If you decide you don't want to pay $5 million to a punt returner, I can see a scenario where Turpin gets traded in the offseason. I don't think it's likely, but I can see it. But that's only if a guy like Blue or Anthony Smith steps up in training camp and shows they can be an effective kick/punt returner. And instead of paying Turpin $5 million, you can pay Anthony Smith peanuts. So those will be the only 2 scenarios where I see a guy that we don't expect making a team: slot receiver and cheap return guy. Outside of that, I think what Jeff put up here is pretty much a lock. But just something to keep in the back of your mind. If we go into a preseason game and you see Jayden Blue at punt return and he returns a touchdown and it looks flashy, there may be some whispers of Cavante Turpin may be available for the right price. Just throwing it out there. So that's pretty much all I have about the wide receiver position. We're at 1 hour and 1 minute. So we're just a little bit over our normal threshold. Once again, thank you guys for joining. Kurt Whitmer, you came in late, but I appreciate the comments. Rob Wallace 7501 from YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Appreciate you stepping in for a few minutes. Great question. I'm glad you were able to allow me to explain kind of why I'm doing this. Lee Harrison, a normal regular. Appreciate you joining us. If you want to hear my thoughts on Caleb Downs, go and find the episode from 3 weeks ago. And Jeff, as always, appreciate you and all your contributions and all your support. So definitely appreciate that. Jeff closing us out with another question before we go. Free agent or trade wide receiver that you would like to bring in just for discussion. Let me pull up the free agent list before I answer that question. Because like I just said, and I keep reiterating this, we do not have a backup slot receiver. And that could possibly become a problem during the season. So I'm looking at the available receivers right now. Tyreek Hill still available, but our reports sound like his career is pretty much over. Deebo Samuel, but he's too expensive. Let me just go to the cheap guys. Keenan Allen's still available. That's probably my number one guy. He can play slot and he can play X. Last year, he only made $3 million. I don't think his number would be much more than that if you brought him in. Number two, I really like Hunter Renfrow, wide receiver from Clemson. He played with the Raiders and the Panthers. All he does is slot receiver, but he's elite at what he does. Unfortunately, the league has kind of transitioned to big slot receivers. So the Cole Beasley type slot receivers are becoming obsolete. That's kind of what he is. But if we need a slot, we need a slot. And he's probably the best pure slot that's available. So Keenan Allen, Hunter Renfrow, and then I'll throw in Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett last year only made $1.5 million. He's 34 years old. He's probably forgotten more football than most NFL wide receivers know right now. He's your favorite slot receiver's favorite slot receiver. He's battle tested. He's another one of those guys, kind of like Hunter Renfrow, kind of in that, I almost hate to say it, but old school slots, 5'9", 5'10" guys who are super shifty. But again, we don't have a slot on this team. So if I need a guy who can come in and be a slot, first I'm taking Keenan Allen because he can give me some slot. He can give me some Z. He can even give you a little bit of X if you absolutely need it. Then from there, I'm going Hunter Renfrow. He's a pure slot, but I'd rather have a pure slot than no slot at all. And then Tyler Lockett, who's long in the tooth. I'm looking at the list. I'm out on Sky Moore, a guy I really liked in the draft, but hasn't lived up to expectations. I really like Sterling Shepard, but man, he can't stay healthy. That would probably be the fourth name, but he would have to go through extensive physicals and tryouts. But those are my four names: Keenan Allen, Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Lockett, Sterling Shepard, in that order. In terms of a trade, I wouldn't even know who would have a wide receiver available that would be offering one. Off the top of my head, Houston has a ton of receivers, but most of their guys are big guys. So I don't know if they even have a slot that they would be willing to trade. That's about it. Maybe the Jets have somebody that's a slot, but yeah, those are my free agents I would look at. I would even consider DeAndre Hopkins because he's a good enough route runner and he has good enough hands that if you just need a guy who can play some slot, I think he can make a solid transition in limited opportunities. So that's a 6 guy I throw on the list. So yeah, those are my guys. I don't have anybody I could think of in a trade. But if I needed to trade away a receiver like a Turpin, I'd probably be calling the Rams or I call one of them NFC West teams because they're all kind of copycats of what Seattle would do. Hell no. Hell no. Have you seen him on social media? That guy is I don't want to say it, but I would not touch him if he came and played in Dallas for free. That is a guy who has sabotaged his career, and I feel sorry for him. And it's sad. It's not only sad that he's done this to himself, but it's sad that he doesn't have anybody in his life who can tell him that what he's doing is sabotaging himself. And plus, the Niners still own his rights, so you would have to give up something for him. I wouldn't take him for free. I'm definitely not taking him if I have to give up something for him. But yeah, again, before I go, just to summarize, we're not going to see George Pickens in preseason. You guys can give up that dream. We're not seeing CeeDee Lamb in preseason. You can give up that dream. So all these other guys are going to have a ton of opportunities in games and in training camp to kind of shine and stamp themselves at the bottom of this roster. So it's going to be a really competitive spot. We all have some guys that we like, but to be honest, again, it's a completely open competition. I would be shocked, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Flournoy could end up being wide receiver 5. Those 2 games last year could have been a fluke. And this year, he turns back into a pumpkin. You just never know. But it's going to be competitive. I like that we brought in Sam Howell because he's a real quarterback who knows how to put the ball where it needs to be put. So we're going to have some opportunities for our receivers to really show themselves. We brought in a lot of veterans who know how to play the game. So they're going to probably look really good with the second and third units because people talk about Valdez-Scantling and his bad hands. He's been a starting wide receiver his entire career, including last year. He's coming here and he's going to be playing against cornerback 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's going to look good because he's a freak athlete and he's a professional. Same thing with Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson has been a contributor on some Super Bowl teams for all 4 years of his career. 2 years with the Bucks, 2 years with the Rams. He knows how to play football. And they're going to be going against lesser talented cornerbacks. So they're going to look good when it comes to training camp and preseason. The question is, what is the offense looking for and who do they decide to retain? All right, so that's all I have for today's show. We're at an hour, 10 minutes. Great question, Jeff. Thank you for bringing it home at the last minute. Once again, everybody watching on X, thank you for joining. But one of these days, I got to get you guys on YouTube so you can leave some comments or come to Facebook. Everybody who's joining us from DC4L, thank you for joining as always. For those of you on Facebook, make sure you go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, Bluff City Cowboys. Help me to my path to get to 1,000 subscribers. And those of you on X and YouTube, I appreciate your support, especially on YouTube. Make sure you guys keep subscribing. If you guys on Facebook, on X, please feel free to share this broadcast. Share it to your personal page. Share it to your favorite group. Let the people know what we talked about. Let the people know what I'm doing. Let's help build my support and let's help build Fifth Quarter Nation. Next week's show, we will talk about offensive line. And if we have time, we'll talk about running backs as well. And that'll close out our pre-training camp position breakdown. The week after that will be the week before training camp. I think they go to training camp the Thursday before the show. So I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of pre-training camp news that week. Next week is offensive line. The week after that, we're starting to see some real football. We'll be at training camp. We'll be talking all things training camp. We'll be talking about position battles. We'll be talking about all the stories that will be coming out of camp. For those of you who've been watching, as you can see, I don't do clickbait. I don't hype up stuff that doesn't need to be hyped. If you want to find out what's really going on and you want to hear it from a non-biased position, you can always come to the Fifth Quarter Podcast and get that. Hope you guys continue to join. Hope you guys continue to support. Hope you guys getting these comments, because this show is fueled by your questions and comments. And I will see you guys next week at 8:30 Central Standard Time for our next show on Facebook, YouTube, and X for the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'll probably have a guest joining me at some point within the next 2 weeks, so make sure you guys check in with that. And as always, how we end every show, let's go Cowboys. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next week.